right, welcome to Unit 1, the lecture series. These are going to be a series of very short, very to the point videos that just kind of talk about one topic. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep these 7 minutes or so to get one thing across, and that's basically it. Okay, now just know that these videos are meant to be watched in order because they will kind of build on each other, and watch these just like you would a regular lecture in person. Take notes just like you would in person, okay, because these will be your lectures. All right, so we're gonna start off Unit 1 with kind of the foundations of chemistry, right? The skills that we will need throughout the entire year. So a lot of the skills that we need are kind of lab-based skills, and I know that obviously when we're virtual, you're not going to be in the lab, but you will be doing virtual labs where you'll still have to take data correctly, you'll have to analyze that data, you have to make observations, you'll have to do everything except, the actual mixing of reagents or the actual chemistry portion. So you're still going to have to do things like make measurements. So that's what this first video is talking about. It's just all about how we need to make measurements. And there has to be kind of a standard method for making measurements, right? Because say you have this ruler, okay? And here's 1 centimeter, that large tick mark is 1, the other large tick mark here is 2. And so that arrow represents where you have to measure. So the reason we need a standard method in order to make measurements is not because, 2 people might look at this, one of them says, it's 1.53, and the other says it's 72, right? That's just completely wrong. But what we do need a standard method for is, what if one person would measure that as 1.53 centimeters versus someone else that might look at this and say, you know what, I think that's 1.5382 centimeters. You can't have that discrepancy, right? We have to have a way to know how to take measurements correctly based on your measuring device, your ruler in this case, okay? So one of those can be right, the other cannot be, and it will be based on how we take measurements, okay? So the first thing that you need to be able to do to make correct measurements is to read your measuring device. You need to know what it's labeled to, okay? And what I mean by that is basically what numerical column your measuring device is labeled to. So if you think about your numerical columns, if we have our decimal point here and then there are numbers in front and behind the decimal, you guys know these names, right? This is the ones column, this is the tens column, this is the hundreds, right? And you could keep going, thousands, 10,000s, and so on. If you go to the right of the decimal, we have our tenths, and then our hundredths, and then our thousandths, right? And you could keep going in that direction as well. So what you need to do is look at your measuring device and figure out what numerical column it is labeled to. So look at this device. Here we have 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, and it's broken up into 10 tick marks. So notice this is a whole number, so that would be in the ones, but then each little tick mark here represents the tenths, right? So this ruler is labeled to the tenths, okay? But how we make measurements is we always measure 1 digit past whatever it's labeled to. So our ruler is labeled to the tenths, so we are actually going to measure 1 numerical column past the tenths to the hundredths. Now the hundredths are not explicitly written here, right? So here is 1.5 centimeters. This would be 1.6. You don't get the hundredths in the middle between those two tick marks. So how would you get a hundredths column digit from something that's not labeled to the hundredths? Good. Of course, you're going to estimate that last digit, okay? So that's why I put a 1.53 here, because I am estimating, I'm kind of, in my mind, putting those tick marks in the middle of the actual tick marks that are labeled, right? And then I'm just estimating what I think it would be. And I think that's about 1.53. Someone else might think it's 1.54. But that's fine. All you're doing is making that estimate based on whatever your measuring device is labeled to. Okay, so let's do a couple examples. So, all I'm going to do for these next three examples is just basically change these numbers so we can look at different measuring devices, okay? So here we have a measurement. This large tick mark is 7 meters, the next one is 8. So first you need to figure out what it's labeled to. What is each little tick mark represents? So if you look, it's whole number, and then there's 10 tick marks in the middle there, and so it's labeled to the tenths. Therefore, we need to measure it 1 past the tenths to the hundredths. So we'll look here. We know it's definitely between 7.2 and 7.3, right? So we know it's going to be 7.2 something. You just have to make that estimate for the last digit. I think it's pretty close to the 7.3. It's not quite there. So I would say something around 7.28. Don't forget that unit. Every measurement needs a unit. In this case, it is meters. So 7.28 meters would be good. Let's do another one. About, what if it was labeled 200 centimeters here and 300 centimeters here. And our measurement, let's put it right there. Okay? So again, ask yourself, what is this measuring device, this ruler, labeled to? So we've got 100 as our separation, but again, there's 10 tick marks in the middle there, and so it's not labeled to the hundreds, it's actually labeled to the tens. Since it's labeled to the tens, we have to measure 1 digit past that, and we will be measuring to the ones column based on this ruler. So we know for sure it is between 280 and 290, right? So we know it has to be 280 something. So you'll look at that arrow, make your estimate. It's kind of right smack dab in the middle, right? So it's 285 centimeters, we'll say. Okay? Let's do another one. This will be the tricky one. Let's say this is 7.12. This is 7.13 meters. Okay, 7.12 and 7.13. So what does each little tick mark represent here? What column does this fall into? Hopefully you can see that each little tick mark here will be the thousandths. The thousandth. It's labeled to the thousandth, which means we would need the 10 thousandths as our measured value, right? So let's say right there. That's our measurement. So what do we know that it has to be between, right? So if this is 7.12, what does each little tick mark here go up by? It would be 7.121, 7.122, and so forth. So this would be 7.127 This would be 7.128. So we know it must be 7.127 something. You just have to estimate that last digit. I don't know, it's really close to the left, so I'll put it at 7.1272 meters. All of these digits are known for sure, right? Just by looking at the measuring device, you know all of those digits. It's just this last one that you're always estimating. Always, always, always make that estimated last digit. All right, that's it.